Hello and welcome to Pitt Street Research. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the co-founders of our firm. And joining me from Brisbane on the morning of Monday, the 11th of November, 2024, is Dr. Anthony Noble, who's the CEO of Fiji Kava. Was called Fiji Kava, now called the Kava Company, ASX CCO. Anthony, good morning.
Morning, Stuart. Thanks for talking to me today.
Right. Now, my mistake there for a moment ago is understandable. We still market your core Kava product under the Fiji Kava brand. And it's fair to say that business has been good in 2024, right?
Yeah, we've had a very good 224, about 150% up on the previous year. So yeah, growing very fast under that brand here in Australia primarily, yeah.
Right. So a company went public a few years ago as Fiji Kava. And the idea was, let's create the world's preeminent Kava brand. Now, for those of us who've traveled to Fiji and sampled Kava, it's close to being a staple over there. A product from the Kava plant with known psychoactive properties in mainly inducing calmness and a sense of well-being in people who drink it. I've tried it myself since we got involved in Fiji Kava. Anthony, I'm not going to lie, the product does not naturally taste good, but it made me feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's precisely right. So it's got what we call an earthy and neutral kind of flavour. I think that's the generous way of putting it. Ungenerously, some people say that it is akin to a little bit of muddy water. So it's not a highly soluble product when you mill the roots, but when you process with the traditional way of processing, which is just to dry and grind the powder. That's the right way to process it in terms of safety profile and at least the traditional safe use of the product. So it's important to do things that way rather than using some of the more chemical extraction methods that some people have used in the past. But it does lead to a challenging taste. But we're working on that with flavors, mixes, little blenders that we give out to people to blend up fruit flavors and other things, and recipe books as well. So we're working on the flavor. It's one of our biggest barriers to people trying the product, but once you get over the flavor, yeah, you're right. The feeling that it imparts is very relaxing and very effective weight compared to alcohol.
Right. And it's interesting you should say that. I'm learning more and more that the younger generations, Generation Z, are eschewing alcohol in favor of products like Kava. And so you've got a whole new demographic that has discovered this product to the point where, and this amazed me, go to the state of Florida in the United States, and there's hundreds and hundreds of Kava bars that have sprung up.
Right, yeah. No, that's absolutely right. It's a huge trend, and it's obviously the US has a similar trend. But the statistics are that under the age of 30, about 30% of people or more are not drinking alcohol at all as part of their lifestyle. Now that persists in Australia, the UK, and the US. So a lot of people look at that and say, "Well, is this the legalization of cannabis in the US that's driving this?" Well, it's not, because it persists into countries like Australia and the UK where cannabis is not so freely available. Right. So it's a real change of lifestyle. Potentially, people look at the generation above and the way that they've used alcohol and the effects that it's had on people's lives and family structures and things, and they don't want to follow that. It's also related to the calories, simply the looking good, the sort of Instagram visual generation of people. And we think the generation under that, I think they call them Generation Alpha now. They've gone through the alphabet from Z to Alpha. That number's more like 50%. So it's a growing trend of young people turning away from alcohol to other ways to relax.
Right. Now, it's interesting. We had this discussion previously. I've been working on some weight loss at the moment. I'm almost back to my target weight range. And what I was interested in exploring when I was using Fiji Kava was to see if it could have appetite suppressant properties, and sure enough, it's good for that too. So there's a whole lot of undiscovered stuff in this product, which I think is going to be great for business wise for you.
Yeah, that's right. So there are some segments of the market in the US in particular, what they call the biohacking community, where Kava is used to support the intermittent fasting protocols. So there's also a degree to which Kava is used for recovery from substance addiction. So we think that propensity of Kava bars in Florida that you've observed actually correlates to some of the opioid epidemic demographics in the US, where people have had substance use issues and then they come off those substances, be that alcohol, be that an opiate, and they use the Kava and other herbal type of products to reduce the craving. So I think the belief would be that these subduing cravings for drug recovery is a similar mechanism of action to subduing the cravings for food during a fast, or for for people that might use it for even more serious addiction problems. Now, we don't market for those particular drug recovery things, but we do see a correlation there in the US. But for the intermittent fasting, yeah, a lot of people find that it does work. And I can tell you, when I've been in Fiji, sometimes I have to drink quite a lot of kava at a ceremonial kind of situation. And you do not feel like having dinner after that. You feel like going straight to bed and turning off the lights and having a sleep.
Right. Now, it's interesting. Go back in time. The Fiji Kava went public, I think it was 2019 or thereabouts. And pretty much a lot of people hadn't heard of Kava at that time.
Mm.
It's taken a few years, but since you took charge of this company in 2021, you've got your mojo in terms of the right marketing response. Turns out that you're shooting the lights out online. If I go into Coles supermarkets around the country, with the exception of the Northern Territory, I can also get a Kava there. And those two channels are proving quite successful to you, to the point where in a couple of years we can potentially be talking about this company being cash break even.
Yeah, probably even earlier than a couple of years. So that's right. So the company began many, many years ago as a private company. Founder Zane Yoshida started the company actually as a Singapore entity operating in Fiji with sales into the US. There was a significant negative impact on the kava crops of Cyclone Winston in 2016, which caused the loss of a lot of kava in the ground. So the ASX listing was sort of, I guess, the second generation of the company, December 2018. So came online. And at that time in Australia, the legality of kava was that it was legal as a drug or a complementary medicine in pill potion format, but not as a drinking kava. So we were very lucky to have some regulatory changes that were led by the Morrison government as part of what they call the Vuvale friendship with people in the Pacific. And
that's where we could fly to Fiji and bring back more than the usual amount of kava.
that's right. So the personal importation limit went from 2 to 4 kilograms is phase one. Phase two was a pilot importation trial for commercial companies like ourselves. So that actually came through in 2021 December. So we were lucky enough to have that regulatory change coincide with our business starting to ramp up production. And we had a bit of a first mover advantage here in Australia with the drinking kava. So we had a business in Fiji and in the US for the drinking kava, as well as a pills and complementary medicine business here in Australia. So we could plug our supply chain into the Australian market. And then we've really been working on what's the right way to market this product as a recreational drinking beverage, as a substitute to alcohol. And where we have seen significant success has been through the online social media-based marketing through Meta. And then we've been supported really from day one by Coles. Actually, Coles has been a wonderful supporter of us putting kava on the shelf for the first time. We worked very hard with them on some of the sensitivities around Indigenous people. Coles is the biggest employer of Indigenous people in Australia. So they have an Indigenous affairs panel that looked at things. So we came to a good agreement as to what geographies we would exclude with them. And they've supported us with the product, and they're obviously now seeing a great return as the sales are increasing even more strongly in Coles than they are online actually at the moment.
Right. So it's interesting. I mentioned that you can't get this product in the Northern Territory. That's because historically it's been regarded in some circles as a drug of abuse, and particularly amongst Indigenous communities in this country.
Yeah, so kava was introduced into the Indigenous communities actually by the Fijian Methodist ministries, missionaries that were there. So there was a number of Fijian missionaries working in the Indigenous communities. They saw the impact that alcohol was having, and they knew that in their communities back in Fiji, drinking kava, obviously kava doesn't make you violent or anything like that. It just very calms you down. So the missionaries introduced the kava into those communities. There was some stigma around misuse of kava with alcohol that occurred. So it was actually 2001 when that ban was put in place under John Howard's government, due to that misuse in the Indigenous communities. So what persisted was actually a state act called the Kava Control Act in the Northern Territory. So there is a state piece of legislation that means the sale of kava in the Northern Territory is still banned. So that's why that's also cut out from a legislative perspective.
So I mean, the big picture I'm seeing as we look at this company is, you go back in time, a lot of jurisdictions around the world were worried that kava was a bad thing. I think of the ban in Germany, for example, about 2001. Now, that turns out to have been a product that is not sourced under best practice like you, which was causing, it is believed, liver issues in a small number of consumers. Well,
Yeah.
so that's all ancient history now in terms of what this product really is like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the history with that was that pharmaceutical companies in Germany were taking kava and they were extracting the drug from kava with alcohol and benzene and solvents to create a small molecule type drug.
Yeah, go figure. That's going to cause liver problems at some point.
That's right. And contamination, it was a there was material in the supply chain that wasn't the noble kava. It was actually adulterated material. So you had the double whammy of a pretty chemical process with some adulterated material in the supply chain. All those bans have actually been overturned in the courts, but unfortunately, the damage to the industry was such that it could never recover from there. And obviously, once the pharmaceutical companies had that market back to the traditional benzodiazepines, it was very difficult for those companies that were using kava to switch back. But we're hoping that those regulatory restrictions start to relax. We know that there's one or two countries starting to come online in Europe for kava importation, but the big one for us would be the UK. So there are promising initial signs that the UK is looking to liberalise their kava importation laws, and obviously Brexit allows them to be more flexible now. So we think that's probably the next cab off the rank in terms of major markets that will open up, and we have a little blue binder for what to do when that happens to take advantage of it.
So, I mean, my message to investors, and we've got a stake in this company ourselves.
Yeah.
My message to investors: this is like cannabis was a long time ago when there was still a certain stigma around cannabis. You're at the point where the stigma is just about washed out of the system, and here I'm talking to the leading kava entrepreneur in the world. Basically, is right here in front of me, having built a real business that's set to tackle a global opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's some wonderful comparisons between kava and cannabis. I mean, in the US, kava is grandfathered in under what they call the DSHEA Act, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act.
Right.
Orrin Hatch put that through about 30 years ago, actually, 1995.
Right.
96.
That man was consistently ahead of his time, I got to say.
Well, big supporter of the nutraceutical industry in the Utah being sort of a center for natural products, and he was a senator there. That grandfathering means that kava actually can be sold everywhere in the US, whether it's from a 7-Eleven to a petrol station to freely be sold as a dietary supplement in all channels. So in the sense of regulatory certainty in the US, kava is well ahead of CBD. And from a user experience effect, kava is very similar to the drug Xanax. So you get an anti-anxiety effect. A lot of users who use cannabis have a negative effect around feeling anxious or having an unpleasant feeling. It might put you to sleep, but you become very psychologically paranoid. Some people do.
Right.
Kava's got the opposite effect. It's an anti-anxiety drug that makes you sleep, so it's pharmacologically more pleasant, and it's much freer to sell in the US than the CBD or the cannabis products, and there's genuine regulatory certainty there. So in Europe, yes, we still have a little bit of a barrier, but we think things are changing. In the US, I always say to people that kava delivers what the CBD and the cannabis industry promised but couldn't deliver.
Right. So I'm talking to all of my American friends who voted for Kamala Harris last week that they need to stock up on kava right now because it's going to be good for them.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely take the edge off a stinging loss.
Right. What's interesting to me as well about your stewardship of this company is the way in which you've taken care of other issues that could potentially derail your business. So you mentioned Cyclone Winston a second ago, devastating the kava crop in Fiji. You've now diversified your supply chain. You still source a fair bit in Fiji, but there are other places in the Pacific, such as Vanuatu, where you can also supply product. So cyclone season comes along, you're pretty robust in terms of not having your business disrupted.
Yeah, absolutely. So the founder of our business is a gentleman called Zane Yoshida. He came back into the business from a non-executive director to the COO role over the last 2.5 years. And he's been focused very strongly on our supply chain, our processing technology, and the robustness of the business in Fiji. Fijians live with cyclones and weather events as part of their everyday life. It's just on a Pacific island, you have to think about that. So the way that we've moved is we had a farming operation which we've walked away from. We had a lease with that farm that we allowed that to lapse, and we've now worked in a more commercial hub and spoke model. So we have about 8 to 9 different areas where we collect kava from, spread out across all the Fiji islands. That means an individual weather event couldn't knock out all of our collection centres, and we have a central processing hub on the main island of Fiji in Nauru, which is about 30 k's from the port of Sula. So well-located central processing centre with multiple hub and spoke collection centres around Fiji. And then the other thing that Zane's been doing very strongly is he was just at Chogam drinking kava with King Charles recently and talking to people from other Pacific islands such as Tonga, Samoa, There's significant Kava in PNG. There's a lot of Kava as well in Vanuatu. So we're now expanding to what we call the regional supply model, and that's part of our sort of bigger risk management for the supply chain. So we should be able to be sourcing Kava from almost all the places where it grows, which is across the Pacific. And that also lets us as well hedge ourselves against particular changes in pricing or market forces in individual countries driving prices up. So, we're processing in the realms of 10 tons of Kava a week at the moment. We want that's going to come up to about 25 tons after we finish upgrading our factory. So we will be one of the largest Kava off-takers in the world. 90+% of Kava is still consumed locally in the countries where it's grown by locals. So it's not a huge amount of the overall market, but as a commercial processor, we're probably one of the biggest, and we're really expanding the way that we do things. And as you say, diversification is risk management when it comes to these agricultural supply chains.
Right. So it's November 2024. What's 2025 hold for this company as we move towards that all-important profitability margin, profitability point, which is coming sooner rather than later?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think for us, it's we've got our Fiji Kava brand, which we sell here in Australia. Our other brand in the family is Taki Mai, which is our brand for ready-to-drink products. So we're launching flavored Taki Mai shots in the US, as well as stick packs with flavor. So in the US, we can put flavor in the Kava. In Australia, it's not possible to do that under the current regulatory regime. So flavored Kava shots in the US for the online channel, Amazon channel. We do around about $1 million a year on Amazon, just over that. So expanding that US channel to include the flavored Kavas under Taki Mai, and then moving more into the ready-to-drink market. So our evolution has really been, I call it sort of back to the future, Kava from a drug turning back into a recreational drink, which is what Kava's traditional use case has been, and then modifying those drinks to suit the palate and consumer preferences of particular countries. So for the US, as you can imagine, they want stronger flavors, sweeter flavors, things that meet the US palate. And then hopefully, as we open up new markets around the world, the basket of ready-to-drink products that we have will be the way that we attack those markets. So yeah, consumers can expect to see the US grow as a proportion of revenue, new brands to be launched under those ready-to-drink formats, and us to look and feel much more like a traditional functional beverage company.
Right. So basically, the message here is this is a company that's found its way forward in terms of the market opportunity. It's innovating around the brand that you're beginning to create, and the consumers are responding to that. What I'm curious about though is what coming further on the regulatory front here in Australia, as in can we ultimately go back to the relevant authorities and say, listen, can we sell this as a sweetened product here because we can pretty much say it's harmless.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a very important part of the evolution forward for us. So we passed through the two-year initial window of the Kava importation program that was put in for commercial importation. So we're into the third year. All indications are that there's been an extremely low level of any negative impacts, particularly in Indigenous communities. What we're hearing informally from the people at DFAT and health and other departments is that there's not enough data yet for them to be able to make that final decision. So I think obviously a low number of negative events means not enough data. At some point, the absence of negative events should start to put the case together for relaxing the regulations here. Kava's under its own particular food standard in the same way that baby formula and a few other special foods are. So we do have our own specific standard. It's a food standard. It's Australian, New Zealand food standard that needs to be revised. But we hope that with time and the weight of evidence, we do see regulations open up here a little bit more. But for us, we've got those products formulated. We're launching them in the US. We'll be able to launch them in most other markets around the world. So when Australia does relax the regulations, we'll be in a position to simply take the formulas that we sell overseas and bring them here. In the meantime, we work around things. We have some flavored powdered mango and peach flavors, for example, which we sell with the Kava, and along with a recipe book and a little blender that people can use to make up a sweetened or fruit flavored Kava drink. But at this stage, the user needs to put the two things together, which frankly is a little bit silly, but that is the way the law is written here at the moment.
Right. Yeah, we've all encountered somewhat silly regulations over the years. For investors who don't know you, you've got a PhD in, I think, biochemistry, MBA as well. So quite an educated guy, and you had a number of other life sciences companies that you've worked on over the last decade or so. This is your first venture into the public domain. Give us a sense of what your career has been like.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely spent too much money on my racking up a HEX bill for sure. My PhD was part of the tissue regeneration focus here at Queensland University of Technology. So part of tissue repair. So I worked in diabetes wound care as my PhD. And I spent a little bit of time working in private stem cell banking. So working with a number of private umbilical cord stem cell banks. And from there, I went into the natural products industry with a company called SFI Health, which was a natural and herbal products company. Worked there for about 10 years, during which time I did my MBA and moved more into the M&A side of things. So we built that business by acquiring around 8 different companies around the world, bringing them together into a medically focused natural products company, and then returned to Queensland where I grew up to build a business called Australian Biotherapeutics, Probiotics and Live Biotherapeutics business in the Sunshine Coast, and then came over to Fiji Kava for the really I knew about Kava from my history in the natural products industry. It was a huge product in Europe, so we always wanted to put a Kava product together, but the supply chain was a bit difficult to crack. So I guess when I got to know the Fiji Kava story, what had been done on the supply chain side, I thought this is great. And when it comes to natural products, there's a lot of stuff on the market that doesn't do anything for you. So starting with a product that really does work from a pharmacological perspective is a big head start in natural products. So I think it's a great journey.
It's impressive to me as a big user of nutraceuticals myself. When you get trust in a brand, it's hard to wash it away. So, it's hard not to walk away from Blackmores because they've done the hard work on doing data and sourcing best kind of products, and you brought that ethic into Fiji Kava / Karma Company.
Yeah, and we're very focused. We're a company that's really focused on a single ingredient. We've got a small CBD concern in the US that has an extraction technology that we think is going to be really important for our future plans as well. But we're quite focused in the Karmaco on a single product compared to a Blackmores or a Swiss where they are offering a bigger range of products. And I guess for us, the evolution from nutraceutical to functional beverage is we think the right play. And one of the reasons that that's important to the evolution from nutraceutical to functional beverage is we think the right play. And one of the reasons that that is important is actually to do with exit multiples. So in the nutraceutical business, you do need a diverse range of products to be a scaled, successful company. Whereas with functional beverages, single products or more focused companies can reach scale in that more core consumer segment. And if you look at some of the acquisitions that Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, and Coke are making in functional beverage, the exit multiples are extremely attractive. So we think that pivot is very important for long-term shareholder value and exit, obviously.
All right. Dr. Anthony Noble, I'll drink to that. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us here at Pitt Street Research, and well done on everything you've achieved at Karma Company since you took charge.
Thank you, Stuart. Cheers.